Let's take a few minutes out for some good parenting advice. Andy, you've got a case study for us?
Yes, we had a letter from Avneet. She says that she and her family moved to a new area recently, and her son Arjun, who's 15, had to change school. At first he seemed to make friends, but then he became a bit withdrawn and secretive. Nothing too bad, she says, but then the new school called to say that Arjun had been missing lessons. They had no idea where he was. Avneet phoned around Arjun's friends' parents and found out that he'd fallen out with his best friends. Apparently he'd been hanging around with a crowd of bullies and troublemakers at the school. When he eventually did come home, he wouldn't answer any of Avneet's questions. She says she shouted at him. Arjun just ignored her. When it happened again, she was a complete wreck. Her husband couldn't get away from work. He said call the police, but Avneet wanted to give her son a chance to explain himself. When Arjun finally turned up, his parents were angry and on edge. It turned into another shouting match. Arjun ran off saying he hated them, they never understood, they didn't really want him, that sort of thing. This time, Avneet says they did call the police, but it felt like the officers were questioning their parenting skills, though at least they brought Arjun back into the house. So now, Avneet says it's deadlock. Arjun won't talk, he won't listen, and she can't really understand what's happened. So what do you think the root of the problem is here?
Well, it seems that if you look at the tip of the iceberg, it was changing schools, but before that there was obviously issues going on. Self-esteem doesn't just come through one thing, it's a build-up of many things. Yeah. Changing his friendship group is interesting, that he's gone to the rougher side of friendships. So maybe there he's trying to make a statement.
Right. I mean, are there some signs that you can look out for that you think is down to self-esteem?
The signs are withdrawal, moodiness, anger. The silence is interesting, that he just ignored her for a few days. That means he was probably brooding over what the argument had been about and taking it probably all to heart.
Yeah. Are there any sort of physical outward signs, change of appearance or anything like that?
Yes, there can be. I mean, if he's hanging out with a different bunch of boys, then maybe they dress differently. You know, maybe all of a sudden his clothes aren't good enough. Or he you know, this doesn't suit me anymore, you know, I want to change my style.
Sure. So are there any do's and don'ts in this situation for Avneet and her husband?
The first one is definitely don't argue. The fact is that he'll argue back. He'll press your buttons. Yeah. One of the main things is that you stay calm. Somebody in the house has to be calm. There's something going on with your son.
What about the father in this?
Well, I think the father, to me, is the most important figure. The father, if he'd taken time out and come home from work and actually found him himself maybe, or certainly had been at home when he came home, it would have been a very different story if he would have probably talked to him. Fathers are so important when it comes to sons. Sons look up to them, but the fact that he'd taken time out to be at home for when he came home would have had a huge effect on him.
Sure. And what about other people? Is there anyone else that Avneet maybe can turn to, do you think?
Yes, there is. Really, she wants to look at maybe at school, if there's a teacher that he relates to, or if they have a friend or an uncle that he gets on well with and they talk to. You know, who's he still talking to? That's it, to find out who is he still talking to that you would trust to take him to somewhere neutral and talk.
Sure. And changing schools at 15, is that a regular issue?
Well, no, it's not a regular issue, but it is a huge issue for the child, because if you think they're established, they've got their friendship group and they might have come through primary school. It won't be the only thing, though, that has knocked his self-esteem. That will probably be the last thing.
Sure. So if there is one piece of advice you can give in someone in a situation like this, a parent in a situation like this with a boy of 15, what would you say?
Take a deep breath, step back, and don't shout and scream. It just doesn't work. It actually makes them further away. You are actually almost pushing them away. The thing is to remember it's about him and not you, and however angry you are, you can deal with that later. Your son's much more important.
Sure.
Remember, you're not alone. There is help out there, and you can help and support your son if you go to the website and click on. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. Goodbye.